So, Gavin, thank you for agreeing to talk to us. Why are you here exactly? What is it about this gathering in particular which you think is worthwhile?
I suppose if one was to use an image for our political situation, it would be that we're on board a large bus which is heading downhill with a cliff at the end of the road, and it has insufficient brakes and it's not quite clear the steering works.
The wayward bus.
The wayward bus, and this is the bus of socialism, cultural Marxism, a neo-progressive bus, and it is, and the whole of the Western world is riding in it. And if you ask democratically or ideologically or spiritually, I mean, in one sense, if we're going to have this conversation, we ought to say, well, are we talking politically, metaphysically, psychologically, what the levers are for change? There don't appear to be any. Now you can put that down to malign conspiracy, or it's a mistake, or it's the end of liberalism, which has run out of corrective levers. But whatever you put it down to, there has to be, first of all, an alternative, and secondly, an attempt to hijack the bus.
And so you see this gathering arc as a step in that direction, or at least potentially this is something you think that could take control of the steering wheel.
Well, there are some people on the bus saying, where are we on the map? And if as it seems we're going to go over a precipice very shortly, is there anywhere else we'd like to go? And if we did want to go there, how would we get there, and how would we take control of the bus? So these, and I'm really sorry to say, but we're only at the very beginning of asking those questions. So one of the things ARC is saying is, are we content to go over the cliff? And clearly we're not, because that's why ARC's happening. So if we're not content to go over the cliff, where might we like to go? So this requires a fairly coordinated conversation about conservative philosophy, economics, and religion above all, because religion, and I would say Catholicism, is the ideological source of nourishment, the spring for what created the bus and the road in the first place. So there has to be a rediscovery of the original inspiration. Then there's got to be some kind of pragmatic consensus about what happens next. And there was, I think he's not very welcome in some circles, but there's a Russian philosopher called Alexander Dugin, who is supposed to be, his enemies say that he's Putin's Rasputin. I've no idea what his personal merits or demerits are, but one of the things I've heard him say that I thought was convincing was that the three major ways of understanding our society have broken down: fascism, communism, and liberalism. All three of them are broken, and they're not fit for purpose.
That's a very interesting thought.
So then, he says, it would be stupid of us to go and try back and fix any of them, including liberalism. So what next? And one of the things our ARC ought to be doing, and this is beyond my pay grade, I'm not a political philosopher, that ought to be saying is, let us not make the mistake of reimagining we can patch up the kind of liberalism that brought us to this place in the first place.
And there's been quite a lot of apocalyptic talk about this being a civilizational moment.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Do you think that we are actually at a point where, it is easy, let me say this, it is easy, particularly within a political circle, which in a sense is self-identifying, it's easy to sink ourselves into a position of great pessimism and great alarm. I wonder whether you think the alarm is fully justified, or are people getting a little bit hysterical about it?
Oh, heaven's sake. Well, let's distinguish between the two. It's inappropriate. Whether you believe it, whether you become pessimistic or not, I think depends on whether you believe in God.
Yes.
First of all, I believe in God, so I don't do pessimism.
Yes, like you, I think that if you're a Christian, you cannot really be a pessimist.
Right. So now the alarm. If you've built a house over a geographical fault and the earth is shaking, you ought to be alarmed. So the alarm is entirely justified. I think that we should consider how on earth we're going to avoid civil war. I think we are going to have to concern how do we avoid a complete economic breakdown. We've had a few tremors in the last 20 years. How are we going to avoid those people we live amongst who have begun to achieve a democratic platform for some form of totalitarian control, whether it's an alternative religion or alternative political philosophy, because there are three major contenders. There's the Christian mindset, the Islamic mindset, and the Marxist mindset. The Islamic mindset, you only have to look and see what the dominant political cultures are in terms of Islam, and you can look at Iraq or Iran or the benign aspects of Saudi Arabia, but not everyone has oil. But they're not enormously encouraging, and they're certainly not encouraging to free speech and Christianity. No. And then you can look at what Marxism has done in the last 150 years. It's killed 160 million people. It always does the same thing. It locks you up and then it kills you if you don't agree with it. So I think we're entirely justified at the close proximate presence of Islam and Marxism, both of which have entered into a pact to leave each other alone until they've destroyed us. Now, what happens after they destroyed us and who wins that pact, we could talk about, but I'd rather they didn't destroy us. So what ARC is doing is, I think, clearing the ground for us to say, if we're going to have a renewal of the philosophy, religious and political, that brought us here, or a reimagining of it, what would it look like? Absolutely we should be alarmed, because, I, for example, couldn't get any of the jobs I've worked at and heard of my life with my present views on heterosexual marriage. I'm unemployable. Is that a position for being alarmed? I think so. I can't get myself. I used to write for the Times and the Telegraph and other places. And I used to have a program on the BBC. Will any of them allow me to do those things now? No. Should I be alarmed? I am alarmed. Absolutely, alarm is very necessary. We're not alarmed enough. I don't mean in terms of hysteria, but I mean if you want to avoid the crash, or you want to avoid other people controlling you and shutting you down, now is the time to act.
In your own case, in your personal case, the way that the mainstream media has frozen you out is, what do you ascribe that to? Do you say that is because, do you believe that it's because your Christian views put you at odds with what we might term the cultural norms?
Yes, I spent last 25 years of my professional life as an academic at a university. And it was perfectly clear to me during that period of time, partly this is one of the reasons why I try and bring a degree of articulate awareness to the problem. I've seen it coming for quite a while. My views, both as a Christian and a libertarian, have been a threat to the growing consensus of whatever. Well, and here's our difficulty. We can't even agree on what the enemy is. I would call it a form of cultural Marxism. It's certainly Marxism. It's certainly soft totalitarianism with an iron fist inside the velvet glove. But we're not agreed that's the right name for it. However, it doesn't like Christianity, and it doesn't like freedom of speech. It even dislikes even more freedom of thought. And as I'm a Christian who's practiced freedom of speech and freedom of thought in as competent way as I can, they don't like me. And so I say they sounds a bit paranoid, but the mindset that dominates our society wants to make sure that people who think, speak and pray as I do have no place in it to influence others.
Now you run a very successful YouTube site. You have a lot of subscribers and a lot of interaction with people. Do you agree with those who say there is something of a revival going on, and there are more young people now in our society looking to connect with spirituality, who are getting into prayer? Or is that just wishful thinking, do you think?
So I think what you're doing is you're asking me the opposite side of the pessimism question. And the trouble is, the way that's been presented in the last 15 years is a way I've disagreed with. I've been told by my Protestant charismatic friends that revival is round the corner. I've been hearing that really since the 1970s, and it's turned out never to have been true. What is round the corner? The answer is human beings have been so constructed that we cannot live without God. We cannot even stay sane without God. So there's a degree, to the degree that we are killing ourselves and following a culture of death, both with abortion and euthanasia and the sterilization of our youth. So the culture of death is upon us badly. That there is a degree of madness gender dysphoria would be the best example of that, where there's been this extraordinary fracture between the scientific reality that was originally our foe, but has now become a foe to this creation of third wave feminism, this you can be whoever you are in your head thing. To the extent that we are fighting death and madness, people don't want to be dead or mad. To that extent, Christ, a living relationship with God, is the antidote to not being dead or mad. Now you must tell me whether you think people don't want to be dead or mad enough to become Christian again. Then I can tell you whether I'm optimistic.
Just a couple of hours ago, I was talking to Johannes Hartl, an interesting man who described himself as a praying philosopher, someone who is a Catholic, but who has, what he seems to have managed to do is, out with the confines of the established church in Germany, he has actually managed to bring a lot of people to prayer and to spirituality. And he believes that established church structures are, to some extent, they're part of the problem, not part of the solution in some ways. And I wonder if you can see, I mean, A, do you agree with that? And B, if he's right, and if it's the church itself which is putting people off, what is the way around that?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked me that, because I have an enthusiastic answer. So essentially what you've done is you've presented me with an intellectual version of we don't like organized religion.
Yes.
To which the answer has always been, what kind of disorganized religion is it that you really want? And the point is that you mustn't always believe what people say, because they often mean something different behind the words. So the I don't like organized religion bit means I don't want to submit myself to the Catholic Church. Really, it means that. I don't want people having any kind of authority over me. Then they say, well, okay, so how much wiser, better, and more productive at doing all this are you? And the answer is never very impressive. So let's go back to his point. The difficulty is, it sounds like a last throw of a kind of late adolescent libertarianism that's characterized our society. I don't want to follow the family rules. Let me make my meals when I like, clean my bedroom when I like. Mummy, don't tell me when to do my chores. The fact is that faced as we are with a rationalistic society that has entirely lost a sense of the miraculous and the supernatural, there is always going to be a difficult line between authentic supernatural and inauthentic supernatural. If you like, between the genuine Christian miracle and magic or something worse. Now, my experience of people is that most can't tell the difference. It's the gift of discernment, the discretia, the capacity for telling the truth about things is not easily come by. And people have mocked the Catholic Church for the Inquisition, but what they forget is that whenever someone comes around saying God is doing something, some grown-up needs to look at it and say, is this God, is this a human imagination, or is it the devil? Well, I don't trust freelance libertarian post-adolescent philosophers to know the answer to that. I trust the Catholic Church to know it, because it's been doing it for 2,000 years. And one of the reasons I became a Catholic is that having tried all the other alternatives, they failed. Now, that's not to say that Catholicism is immune from all the struggles, perversions, toxicities, and human failures that human beings can bring to any organization when they put their mind to it. Of course it isn't. The difference is that God has promised to save it and renew it and cleanse it. And over the last 2,000 years, that's what he's done. Who would have thought we could have survived the Borgias? Who would have thought we could have survived Pope Francis? But as it is, the promises of Jesus seem to me self-evidently to apply to the Catholic Church. And I'm a very enthusiastic convert Catholic, because I've tried most other things and they don't work.
Cast your mind back to when Gavin Ashenden was a young man. What would your view then have been of the Catholic Church?
I can tell you, because I had a near-death experience, where I went to heaven, I was judged, forgiven, and sent back, and I didn't know it was Jesus, but I knew it was a Trinitarian God, which may sound odd, but at the age of 19, one's not terribly worked out.
Were you a Christian at that point?
I had been baptized, and I had spent my adolescence in alternative attitudes. I decided 1 year I'd be an atheist, and next year I would be an Anglican Christian. And I went on that role through my adolescence in order to try and find out what was real. And I hit a very bad crisis, and it coincided with an evangelical Christian mission to my university run by David Watson. Some people may remember him. I heard what he said. I realized in the way he represented Jesus to me, this is what I had encountered in this out of the death experience where I was forgiven, restored, and sent back. And I therefore conditionally converted for periods of 48 hours. I would live as a Christian 48 hours, I'd say my prayers, I'd go to church, and I would review it in case somehow I'd been trapped, because I'm a skeptic. And after a while, I said to the Lord, okay, it really is you. Now, which branch do I follow? Can I tell you what I would like? And I said to him, I quite like the Pentecostals and I quite like the Catholics, because it seems to me they both really take you seriously. And my failure to understand you and know you has been because I haven't taken you seriously. I don't think the Anglicans take you very seriously. So Lord, I'd like to be a Pentecostal or a Catholic. Which would you like me to be? And then to my great surprise, he said, you stay an Anglican. So I said, okay. So for 40 years, I did what he told me until the road ran out. Now I'm a Catholic with Pentecostal leanings.
Yes. That must, I mean, you describe it in a very human and jocular way. I'm sure it can't have been easy. These questions are not easy, are they? I mean, was it a wrench to leave Anglicanism?
It's no more of a wrench than you face every time you kill your ego for the love of Jesus. To be a Christian means you have to die 1,000 times. We are forever having to pick up our cross and crucify ourselves. They're usually small things. Sometimes they're very big things. This one, it's just a big thing, but it's the same pattern every time. We develop a facility for clinging on to things that make us feel comfortable. I quite like my prefixes. I like being the Reverend Canon Doctor. I wanted to become the Reverend Canon Professor. I'd given I need half a more book, and I'd have been there. You get used to being stroked, your ego being stroked. Every so often the Lord does us a favor, and he strips us down and says, start again for love of me. It's a healthy and good thing. It's not easy, ever.
When you look at the Anglican Church today, I mean, it's got its travails as we speak. I mean, the headline news and so on. Do you see it actually collapsing and disappearing? I mean, what do you think will happen in Anglicanism?
You have to ask yourself what Anglicanism is.
What would you say it was?
Well, I know what it is. The history is quite clear. Anglicanism was a state-sponsored attempt to diminish the internal tensions of the revolution, of the Reformation, and the political ramifications that had. And in the 16th century, the political ramifications were earthquakes and religious wars. And Anglicanism was a very sophisticated solution to political and religious earthquakes of the 16th century. I remember at a vote in General Synod that was particularly horrible in 2008, when my diocesan bishop, who was a very competent theologian, put his arm around me and said, Gavin, we've just tonight seen the death of a 500-year-old ecumenical experiment. I said, no, that's, you can't be serious, that's horrible. But he was right. The Anglicanism is a state-sponsored ecumenical experiment that lasted 500 years. It had some wonderful things about it, and some dreadful things about it, but it ran out of steam. Its raison d'etre is ended. You can't have a state church in a state that despises Christianity.
No.
Or if you do, the state church has to say, repent and become Christian, or we can't walk with you, or else lose all its integrity and die. It's chosen to do the latter. What can you say? I mean, for the whole of my life, I've been saying as an Anglican, we have to say to the state, repent and come our way. And there were lots of Anglicans saying that, but the other lot are in power and have bought into the whole, particularly in terms of sex, which is in a very strange and weird way, the kind of pleasure-seeking Epicurean mark of a secular consumerist society. Anglicanism in this country has officially subscribed to an atheist, pleasure-seeking, sexually dysfunctional culture. That's not Christianity. It either has to repent and become Christian, or it will die. At the moment, it's dying.
That leads us with a bit of a structural problem, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, absolutely.
As one might term it.
Yes, that's a very polite way of saying it. Yes.
Because the COV is knitted into the fabric of the Constitution,
Yes.
in a way which the Catholic Church is not.
Yeah, absolutely.
So-
yes. Well, was, but is not. Yes.
Yes, was once, is no longer, and hasn't been for 500 years.
Yes.
So
About to ask a very interesting question. Wait to see how you frame it.
yes. So if we accept that that is a problem, how do we go about?
There's a wonderful
What
story.
substitute can there be?
There's a wonderful story where there's an Irishman who meets a traveller, and the traveller says, "Would you please tell me the best way to Dublin?" And the Irishman says, "If I were you, sir, I would not start from here."
Yes.
And you know, well, there is no solution. So, I mean, if you think of the amount of legislative time it would take to unravel the legislation through the Privy Council and elsewhere that's accumulated over the last 500 years, I'm not even sure it could be done with an army of lawyers and endless resources. I'm not sure it could be done. But it's not going to be done.
No.
So no one is going to de-establish the Church of England. There's better things to do with lawyers' time, parliamentary time. So what will happen? Well, in so much as the £10 billion of Church Commissioners' income is available to the Church, it will continue to run its fancier churches and do fancy stuff for the good of society until the royal family shoot themselves in the foot and they're no longer the royal family. At which point everyone's got a problem, and no one, and that may not be far off either. So you have a royal family that no longer appears to believe in Christianity, inhabiting a Christian structure, the gap between the two being unsustainable. You have Church of England doing exactly the same. At some point, there's a collapse. I can't tell you what will trigger it, or quite how disastrous it will look when it happens. But it'll be a mess. And there comes a point when Jesus says, "Leave the dead to bury the dead."
How do you knit Christianity into politics? So how does
Do ask hard questions.
no
Whose head is on this coin?
Indeed, yes, good answer. But it seems to me, just as an observation, I would say that the idea of how to be a conservative has, in recent years, it has become more apparent to conservatives that actually Christianity has a big role to play in politics. And it's as if maybe you cannot be a conservative unless you are actually a believer in God.
Well, you have to ask what you're conserving. I mean, first, inevitably, historically, you're conserving Christendom. So if you want to conserve Christendom and you don't believe in it, there's a fracture running down your psyche from the beginning. It won't be healthy. You're asking a very difficult question, and I've avoided the whole of my life by saying that the Christians who got involved in politics were all progressive left-wingers who wanted to believe in a political solution, a form of utopianism, more than they wanted to believe in the kingdom of heaven and salvation of the soul. So I said, I'm not doing politics because that's what they do. I will instead concentrate on evangelism and the salvation of souls. That's what it is to belong to Jesus. However, something strange has happened, which I've had to readjust to. And it's not easy readjusting mental maps, but that is that the progressives have parked their tanks on my lawn, so to speak, and are attacking my Christianity with politics. The only way of defending myself is, well, there are two ways. One is spiritually, but I have to defend myself politically. I have to say, you must not arrest women for praying outside in buffer zones. You must not arrest people for waving the Bible and making it accessible in a public square. You must not arrest people for believing that marriage is best served by a man and a woman making love and having a family. I can't say any of those things without being political. So now I'm political. Then the next question you've raised follows. What kind of politics are you espousing? Well, I think ARC is partly trying to find a solution to that.
Yes, exactly.
I agree. I'm not sufficiently politically adroit. I spent most of my life thinking philosophically, psychologically, theologically. I'm not good at politics, I'm afraid. However, I'm very interested in the question, and for the moment, I still go back to saying the question itself won't make sense until you save souls. You have to create a Christian mind in somebody in order that they can then capable of conserving what God has given us in our civilization, or create a Christian mind so that, as with all the Catholic evangelists in Europe in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th centuries, you can then say to the pagans amongst whom you're operating, this map in our mind is a great deal better for your political welfare now and much better for your spiritual welfare then than the one you've got. Try it. Well, eventually I think we're back to the drawing board in the 3rd century. We have to reconvert a pagan Europe, and we have to do it with a clear Christian map in our mind, which we then need to share to others. And at the heart of that map, and this is why you absolutely have to have the Catholic Church, because who else has done this, is the sacralization of the human person. When it comes to saying to the pagans, the human person is sacred because God made them in his image, only the Catholic Church has been there really at abortion and at euthanasia. And the Protestants have said, well, yeah, we can see there's a great deal of the gospel in this, and we'll be along in a minute. And I don't mean to mock them. I'm simply saying the Catholic Church has been there forever, for 2,000 years with this. The rediscovering the sacredness of the human person and all the dignities, I won't say rights because it's a difficult word, but all the dignities and responsibilities that accrue from that is one of the ways in which you reconfigure a political landscape that images the Catholic Christian mind.
You're going to need politicians to do this, of course.
Yes, thank God.
Anyone on the horizon? What did you make of Vance the other day?
I'm praying for a Christian Trump. An English Trump. Well, Vance is fabulous. I mean, we need a Trump and a Vance. Trump, because whatever people, I don't suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. And I love the Shakespearean hyperbole by which he plays the fool and gets people to buy his real estate. I think it's very clever. He's a very, very smooth operator. And all those who despise him do so at their peril because he's good at it. Vance, I think, is stage 2, and I very much hope and pray for a President Vance. There's no one in the English, with all due respect to all the Conservatives, and there aren't very many of them, on the English political scene, and God bless them. Keep going, guys. Well done. We have not yet found our Trump or our Vance.
No, we haven't. Vance, of course, was talking about the very thing you just mentioned, the fact that we now take it for granted that hate speech and these limitations on free speech, but evidenced most shockingly in that case of the young man and the young woman outside the abortion clinics, young people just standing there saying their prayers, and in contravention of the law. I mean, that's an extraordinary point to have arrived at, isn't it? And I thought it was right of Vance to point the finger back at Europe and say, look, if we're standing up for Western values, what exactly are these values?
Well, we're not. The thing that made me, shivered me, what's the right word? Shiver my timbers, that's not it. The thing that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up in the Vance speech was when he said, come on guys, you remember the Cold War? You've changed sides. You're behaving like the people behind the Iron Curtain did. You are cancelling elections, you are denying free speech, you're locking Christians up. I used to smuggle Bibles into the Soviet Union in the 1980s. I did it because they had the values that our society is now practicing. And Vance said to the Security Council at Munich, why have you changed sides? And the next thing I saw was some German military spokesman bursting into tears that Vance had upset him and being nasty to him. Well, may they all burst in tears and flake out, but why have they changed? So I've just done a very interesting interview on our channel, Catholic Unscripted, if I can say so, with Rod Dreher. And I asked Rod the same question because he wrote that formidable book, Live Not by Lies. And Rod's response is essentially we're facing the scenario that Aldous Huxley presented, where we have been lured into the pursuit of pleasure, and are pursuing our own self-destruction spiritually and philosophically and politically in the pursuit of pleasure, and consequently one of the things that produces is a degree of political autocracy that you give yourself to because you like the goodies. So we like the goodies, we are being fed soma, whether it's piped up marijuana, sex on television, or package holidays, whatever your soma is, or pornography, God help us.
Yeah.
And people are content with it and have sold their souls for it.
What's it going to take to turn the tide, do you think?
Pain and disaster. Hence the alarm. I mean, I'm no prophet. I'm just using common sense and a bit of theological thinking. But we're living a lie economically, politically, spiritually. I mean, we're surrounded by lies. I mean, I very much enjoyed my connection with the royal family, but even the way we do royal families, it takes charade to a point where it may be unsustainable. Pageant and beauty and so on. But you have to believe in the stuff somewhere in the centre, or the centre won't hold, as Yeats famously promised. We're living a lie. It will fall down about our ears. It's already, God, look how we've betrayed our children and young women to the rape gangs. And the lie we lived was that it wasn't happening, or we couldn't talk about it because of racism. How dare we lie? I mean, you remember what Jesus said about those who harm the little ones? Well, we've lied about it to let them be harmed to the extent that millions of them. How have we let millions of our daughters be harmed like that by being willing to live this lie? Then there are other lies. You don't need me to cause them, but so it will only be when I rather like when Peter Hitchens the other day said, let's get rid of the lie that are the police and start building some coppers, some Robert Peelers again, because this police force lives a lie. It doesn't defend us. It's an agent of the state. They are too woke and philosophically disabled. We need a new police force. Not defunding the police. We need a new police force that doesn't perpetuate the lie. It goes that deep.
Isn't it extraordinary that when we were young men, the British prided themselves on we had the best police force in the country, we had the best legal system in the country, we had the best unwritten constitution in the world. We felt that we had the best of everything. Yes. And it is our generation, somehow, which has frittered that legacy away. I mean, why and how has that happened? I mean,
I'd like to complain and say, from the moment I embarked upon life as a law student, I set myself the task, particularly having read Solzhenitsyn and been very moved, but to not let that happen. I decided. I mean, I think God and I, between us, hopefully with him as senior partner, decided that being an Anglican clergyman would be the most help I could be. I wanted to do it through the law, but I wouldn't have got anywhere in the law. I didn't get very far in Anglicanism, as it happened, but I did try. But that why is a very complex why.
Yeah, I know. It's mysterious, but it's also true. I mean, the fact is that the collapse has happened on our watch.
Yes, it has, and we owed it at least to, your father must have fought in the Second World War.
Indeed,
and maybe your grandfather fought in the First World War. Well, I feel my son became a fast jet pilot before an accountant sacked half of the fast jet pilots on the RAF, all of whom spent 4 or 6 million training. So, I mean, I have a very strong sense of allegiance to the things that inspired our upbringing. We've been seduced by a lot of things, mainly pleasure and secular utopianism, and it just takes a certain amount of clarity of thought and self-awareness not to be seduced of them. But it's the same story in humankind always. There are seductions, we have appetites, there are illusions. We go back to why I don't trust your philosopher saying, I don't think I want organized religion to tell me what to do. Let's just get together and have a bit of spirituality and authenticity and so on. Good luck, mate.
I think I've misrepresented him.
No, I've misrepresented him. It's all right, not you.
He is a Catholic. Well, and believes in the Catholic Church.
Well, in that case, he needs to get people to become Catholic. But it's hard enough I'm not saying that the Catholic Church is it's very, very far from perfect. It probably has got, I remember one exorcist saying there are more demons per square mile in Vatican City than anywhere else. Because, if the thing works, it's worth attacking.
Yes.
So, I mean,
where would the devil be active?
Right, exactly. So, the Catholic Church is probably the most corrupt institution in the world. That doesn't mean you can do without it.
No.
What it means is that, that's where the real fight is.
Yes.
People keep on saying to me, and it annoys me so much, you've gone from the frying pan to the fire. I said, no, I've gone to where the fight matters.
Yes.
And if were the Catholic Church to go down at the hands of paedophiles or South American utopians, the world's in a really serious trouble. I'm fighting for the church that Jesus founded and invoking his promise that the gates of hell will not prevail against it. If the gates of hell are likely to prevail against it, you will be likely to be in a serious fight. Well, of course we are. But I don't think it's enough to go back to that. I'm not sure which century we'd say, but any of the last 4 or 5 centuries libertarianism and say, just get together, guys, and do spirituality in a meaningful sense. The Catholic Church needs to convert the world again, like it did before, and nobody else could. I mean, of course, from the 19th century onwards, there was some wonderful Protestant evangelism. I know that as well as anybody else. I wouldn't dream of disrespecting it. Quite the opposite. It was wonderful. But most people don't understand from the Counter-Reformation onwards. The real evangelism was done by the Catholic Church, as it was in the whole of the first millennium. And the world now needs a Catholic Church that can convert the world like it did then. There isn't an alternative. But you need the magisterium. You need people who've been about this for a while to say, well, we tried that, and we we got an idea about that. And whether it's at a popular level, if you have poltergeists in the house, on the whole you go for the Catholic exorcist, he knows what he's doing, or whether you go for the Catholic Church's experience of how not to do politics. I don't see any point in the very appealing Protestant version is let's build the go-kart from scratch again, chaps.
You're a tonic to listen to, so you are, Gavin. But you started this conversation, and we just exchanged that view that to be a Christian rules out being a pessimist, because we put our faith in Jesus and we put our faith in God, and we do believe, do we not, that the church will prevail eventually.
Yes. Well, the kingdom of heaven will prevail. The church won't be prevailed against.
No.
But the church is a vehicle to get people to judgment and to heaven.
So to what extent, though, are you, as you sit here now, an optimist about the immediate future? Not at all.
My major preoccupation is keeping the faith so that when I die and I stand before him, he says, welcome into the kingdom. That's my major preoccupation. And after that, to help you do the same, and then my preoccupation is salvation. This is what we're doing now. Time and space is horribly ephemeral. It doesn't, as Augustine famously said, it's a never-flowing river. There's nothing stable about this. We're on a journey. God gave us life. He made us in his image. He launched us. He gave us free will. He gave us his son. He's calling us home. In the meantime, he wants us to resist the devil. We are agents in a cosmic fight that I think goes beyond even the little globe around the sun. We're just called to be faithful. And if we're faithful, we will create a benign environment that approximates somewhat to the kingdom of heaven. And if we're not, we will play our part in creating a malign environment that approximates to hell. We just got to choose. There's no outcome apart from salvation.
Well, as the hymn has it, onward Christian soldiers.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Right. God bless. Thank you. Thank you for talking to me.
If you've enjoyed watching this interview, and I hope you have, and you'd like to see more of this kind of work, you might care to consider making a small donation. If you go to our website, newhumanum.org, and follow the links, you'll find a donation page. Anything you can give us would be gratefully received.